The Italian Wine Podcast is the community-driven platform for Italian wine geeks around the world. Support the show by donating at italianwinepodcast.com. Donate €5 or more and we'll send you a copy of our latest book, My Italian Grape Geek Journal, absolutely free. To get your free copy of My Italian Grape Geek Journal, click support us at italianwinepodcast.com or wherever you get your pods. Grazie mille. Official media partner, the Italian Wine Podcast, is delighted to present a series of interviews and highlights from the 2023 Wine2Wine Business Forum, featuring Italian wine producers and bringing together some of the most influential voices in the sector to discuss the hottest topics facing the industry today. Don't forget to tune in every Thursday at 3 p.m. or visit theitalianwinepodcast.com for more information.
Okay, if you guys want to settle down, we're going to start. It is my great pleasure to invite one friend, one new friend, one old friend. So my old friend is the blonde. Okay, this is Claire Dawson. She is based in Bordeaux. Squillions of experience in the trade from Bordeaux. By the way, just, for your blind tasting, I'm going to give you a big hint. This is not going to be Barolo. Okay? Just one hint. And, of course, Georgie Hindle, who I've met recently, she is actually, what is your title exactly?
It's Decanter's premium editor and Bordeaux correspondent.
Oh, premium. It sounds so sexy. She is the premium editor of Decanter Bordeaux. So I thought it would be I invited her today because I thought it would be really an interesting experience also to have a bird's eye view as to how Georgie, on behalf of Decanter, tastes and evaluates Bordeaux wines. Okay? So Claire's I've asked her to moderate. And if you guys have any questions, it'll be very similar to the tastings we've done the past 3 times. But of course, this will be 1, from a Decanter reviewer, and 2, it will be Bordelais wines. Okay? All right, take it away.
Thank you, Stevie.
Thanks, Stevie. So, yes, as Stevie was saying, Georgie's going to be talking you through today. Georgie, as the Bordeaux correspondent and premier editor of Decanter, will be talking you through her process of how she scores wine within Decanter, specifically for Bordeaux wines. We've changed the theme a bit. As you can see on your brochure, it said something else.
So if anyone wants to leave right now, they can.
You can.
It's not all Right Bank Bordeaux.
It's not. But there'll be 3 different wines, blind, different vintages and different appellations. And Georgie will taste as if she were tasting the wines to score, so you can have an inside view, which we thought could be fun. Yeah. So over to you.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm a little bit nervous, but anyway, we'll get through that. So yes, I am Decanter's premium editor, so I'm in charge of all the fine wine content that goes behind the paywall for subscribers. So anything over £20 we consider kind of fine wine. And also I'm the Bordeaux correspondent, so I've been living in Bordeaux City for about 3 years now, and I've had the Bordeaux job specifically for about 2.5. So I've done a few en primeur campaigns, a few in-bottle campaigns, and kind of cut my teeth with very large tastings very early on. But Decanter's great. Bordeaux's heartland content for Decanter. It's the wines that people pay to read the reviews and scores, and at least 50% of our traffic comes from Bordeaux content. So it's really, really important. It always has been. The links between Bordeaux and the UK have always been very strong. But because of the amount of wine that's produced there, the caliber of wines, the investment potential, all those things kind of add to why it's so important for Decanter readers. So firstly, I guess, and also we cover everything from the value level, so supermarket, under £20 Bordeaux, right up to the kind of high-end, very fine wine, Pomerols, Poix, First Growths, which is nice because we don't miss out the coats or the smaller appellations like Le Sec, where we're tasting one today. So you really get to cover all the styles, red, white, sweet, from all the price categories. And I think that's really great. So firstly, I guess how to taste. I learned with the WSET kind of system, which is very formulaic. You have a set of criteria that you follow from the nose, the appearance, the palate, the acidity, and it is quite systematic. That's what they use. I did do a presentation, but all the slides are just on my computer because there's no projector. So you do kind of learn how to describe a wine very technically. And I think that's great because it does allow you to assess a wine very objectively, in my opinion. You can taste it and you can highlight all the good points, and at the end, you will come to whether it is faulty, fair, good, very good, outstanding, regardless of your personal preference. I sometimes think it's a little bit of a narrow system. You kind of maybe lose some fun and some creativity in your tasting notes, perhaps, when you go this way, and you can always, not always, but you can usually tell an MW's tasting note by the way it's written. Whereas I quite like people who, describe wines in different ways to be more understood by consumers. But essentially, Decanter is a consumer publication. We are writing for consumers, and essentially we want to recommend wines that they are going to buy and to drink. It's not that's what we're doing it for, and hopefully all of our tasting notes kind of get that across, that they aren't just lists of flavors and this fruit and this. It's actually something that people can read and go, okay, well, I kind of understand what that wine might be like. But anyway, so from a tasting point, I generally think of WSET and try to get those kind of markers, and then you add some context to it. So do you know the estate? Do you know the vintage? Has the winemaking had any effect on the particular flavor or style that's come out? How much do I really like it or not like it? And so a tasting note for me, I tend to write quite long tasting notes, which may be a bit boring for some people. But because I haven't been doing the job very long, it helps me to differentiate between the wines. When you're tasting 100 or let's say 40 Saint-Emilion Grand Cru Classé, they're all going to be much of a muchness, let's be honest, but they all equally are very different. So you have to use the descriptors and the exact kind of way the wine feels, I guess. That's how I kind of describe it in order to kind of differentiate between each one. So scoring as well, as scoring is a necessary evil, some might say, and we at Decanter use the 100-point score. I know some UK publications still use the 20-point score, but I never learned that, and so it confuses the hell out of me what a 17.5 plus or a 16 plus plus is, and I don't really know. But certainly for me, the 100-point scale seems to work, albeit it's really a 15-point scale from 85 to 100. I personally don't feel that below 85 points is a recommendable wine. I wouldn't feel comfortable saying to my friend or my family, no, go out and buy this wine. So for me, it kind of starts around the 85 points. And that kind of correlates to the Decanter World Wine Awards, which is done in brackets of medals. So we'll see bottles with score labels on stickers on them, bronze, silver, gold. And then they have an additional platinum award, 97 and above. And then you have kind of the best in show. So some judges go from an awards kind of point of view and think, okay, well, is this a bronze wine? Is it a gold wine? And then within that, where does it sit? So for a bronze is between 86 and 89. So I guess, in my opinion, that would be an okay wine. Recommended, could be good for everyday drinking. It's going to be fine. Silver is from 90 to 93. So that is a good wine. Good, encompasses all those things. That it's going to be nice, nicely balanced, some complexity, some length. Then you've got the gold category is then 95 to 90. Well, actually, it's 95 to 99, but for me personally, kind of 94 to 97, I would put in the kind of great category, and then 97 and above, I'd put in the exceptional.
Are you enjoying this podcast? There's so much more high-quality wine content available from Mama Jumbo Shrimp. Check out our new wine study maps, our books on Italian wine, including Italian Wine Unplugged, The Jumbo Shrimp Guide to Italian Wine, Sangiovese Lambrusco and Other Stories, and much, much more on our website, mamajumboshrimp.com. Now back to the show.
But that's a kind of way some people consider just scoring, essentially. But, scoring has become, specifically for Bordeaux, I'm not sure if everyone finds this for every region, they're so scrutinized. And I think Bordeaux is one of the most widely tasted regions in the world. 7,000 people come to Bordeaux to taste en primeur. has 7,000 opinions of wines, of people tasting different days, different times, the same wines. And so as a critic for Bordeaux, you're competing with all those opinions, and everyone has different tastes, and everyone, you taste on different days as well. So the wines may actually, and they do change. They're specifically for primeurs, they're very young and they're changing all the time. So scoring itself is not an exact science, but also, 88 points is not a bad wine. I think some people nowadays, maybe just for Bordeaux, think less than 90 is not a good wine. I'm not going to buy it. Or a US importer perhaps may not even look to wines that don't score 90 points, because for markets that love scores, they're not interested in those wines. And it can go all the way to the top. Some producers aren't happy with a 98-point wine these days. And you just think, okay, wow, where are we setting the standards here? And so for me, I think an 88-point wine is great. And equally, what does 100 points mean as well? Those wines are maybe increasing in terms of what critics are awarding them, certainly 98, 99, 100. And I think winemaking has definitely improved to the extent that arguably you could say Bordeaux has maybe never been making as good wines. And so it might naturally correlate that you have lots of 100s per vintage. And so maybe there's some kind of element of calibration, of coming down and saying, okay, well, here's, where the top layer is, and I don't want to extend it above 100. I think that's potentially just too complicated. But there are some people now considering maybe bringing it down, the scores, and making that lower level under 90. It's really fine. You're doing a good job. You're making a good wine, and that leaving that kind of top tier of scores to be just those for investment, or ones that are going to have that really long life, or whatever it is.
It's sometimes confusing as a producer when you sample your wines to different critics in the same vintage and you come back with different scores. I mean, what are we supposed to do with that?
Yeah,
to keep the good ones?
Well, there is an element that producers will obviously want to keep the highest scores and the best notes, and certainly it does help merchants sell wines. A 98-point or a 95-point wine, whatever, is going to sell better than a 91-point wine. But I think it's worth following the critic or the kind of opinions that you most naturally fit with the wines. Winemakers obviously have their opinions. They have big teams. They're tasting their own wines all the time. So, and they taste, the other people in the region too. So they're going to know roughly where they fit. Even really egotistical ones must still think, it wasn't as good as the neighbor. So I think you have to, if you really think that you've done a great job, and then you see a note reflecting that, then maybe go towards that critic. And again, if you think, my wine actually this year wasn't so good, or maybe we picked a bit late, picked a bit early, and they've recognized that, then it's worth following those people. But critics, we don't always get it right all the time. And I think with Bordeaux particularly, I found you need to have some kind of experience and some kind of base level of knowledge and understanding. And that's why tasting a lot of wines is great. Tasting at the properties is great. Understanding terroir, understanding the vintages, understanding what they're trying to do will help you do that. And I guess the critics who have been doing that a long time and are really dedicated, they know their stuff. But equally, I would say this, I'm fresh to kind of the scene, I guess, and I come with fresh eyes and a new palate. And I think that's always nice as well, to get a different perspective. I think sometimes if you've been tasting for a very, very long time, you can get a bit blasé about wines, or maybe you have an appreciation of wines that you think haven't changed. You have this idea of a chateau or an estate that make a certain style, and actually they're moving beyond that, but it might not register so much. So go with who you think is maybe most connected to you.
So do you taste by yourself? I mean, or how, where and when do you taste?
Also, ask questions at any point during this whole talk. Don't leave them to the end if you want to know something, or just shout them out. So it really, really varies with decanter. We have things called panel tastings, which go in the magazine, and they're done completely blind, 3 people. You each give an individual tasting note and score, then you talk about the wines. You can champion them if you want to, you can pull them down if you want to. But the idea is to give a fair assessment, and 3 experts who know, usually one is a journalist. So I do the Bordeaux ones. Usually one is a buyer or a merchant, and usually one is a sommelier. So you get those three angles with that. Then, other things, it's mostly done by myself. We don't have the team or the resources to have two people, and it would be nice to have someone else to kind of calibrate with, and sometimes I do that with other critics. Some of us are friends, and you can say, well, did you like that one? Or that one wasn't showing so well. And that's really nice too, because at the end of the day, you're just one person and you can be tasting 100 wines in one day, and it gets a lot. And then you can maybe doubt yourself, or what you really like, but it's not always the best. But generally, blind tasting doesn't happen so often in Bordeaux. I think a lot of the time, especially for primas, people don't send samples. You have to go to certain estates to taste the wines, and they're obviously very open, and that's the way they do it. You can request certain tastings. Let's say if you go to a consultant tasting, you can ask that they're all blind, or as in Saint-Emilion Grand Cru Classé, you can ask. But for a lot of the time, and for me, I think it's nice to know what the wine is. And it's nice to know where it's from and what they're trying to do. And the more estates I visit, the more I understand, that's why that wine tastes that way. And that's what they're trying to do. And so I think with Bordeaux, maybe with lots of other regions, blind tasting isn't always the best. I think it's great for some occasions and to calibrate and to take out the idea of that, it's the first growth, therefore it's got to get a certain amount of points. And I'm sure there is some of that to that extent, but quite often it's just logistically impossible to do blind tastings in Bordeaux. But we do get sent samples, and if we get sent samples and we accept to receive samples, then we'll score them and we'll write the tasting notes online. And if I go to a chateau for a vertical or whatever, then I will eventually write up the tasting notes and scores. Admittedly, I haven't written up everything that I've tasted over the last 2 years, partly maybe for imposter syndrome, that I don't want to just go out there with a score and a tasting note from vintages that I haven't tasted. So, very old ones, 70s, 80s, 90s, I don't have massive experience with those. And for me to just come out and say, well, I think that is that way, just because I've tasted it once from one estate. So I've been trying to build my repertoire of those, and I will publish them eventually. And I'm proud of the work that I've done so far. But so it's a bit of a mixture in terms of how I taste, when I taste it, and the scores. But everything will be tasted and scored, and it will go up onto the website at some point. With Bordeaux, I think it's really important to have context. Like I just said, I think knowing your vintages is really important. As in other wine regions around the world, you do have 5-star vintages, 3-star vintages, and below, and everything in between. And I think that's important to consider. So today we're tasting 16, 17, and 18. So, and feel free to taste ahead and choose your own system of tasting. For me, obviously 17 is a weaker vintage, and I guess you describe it that way because of the weather. It just wasn't very good. They had hail, they had frost, the sun wasn't out as much as in 18, and the wines are considered less good as a whole. And it's a massive generalization because the rainfall could be markedly different in Pauillac to Margaux, for instance. And then one could get 90 mils of rain. This is quite technical and maybe a bit boring. And the other one can get 10. But that will affect the taste of wine. So it's really hard to just generally sweepingly say, it's a bad vintage in Bordeaux, write it off, because it's not. However, for instance, 17, we may want to try this one first, even though when I say... So the first one is 2016, it's a Le Sac Saint-Emilion. The middle one is a 17, it's from Pessac-Léognan. The last one is an 18, and it's a generic Bordeaux. So from my perspective, I think, generic 18, richest, ripest, most opulent vintage of the three. It's a generic Bordeaux. It might be not tough, but a little bit like muscular, a little bit kind of fruity and ripe. Then I think, 16, it's the oldest. It's going to be a little bit more elegant, a little bit more fine. Le Sac, still going to have some structure. It's from kind of that Saint-Emilion region. It's going to have a bit of minerality. But Pessac-Léognan, in my mind, I'm thinking, it's probably going to be the nicest of the wines. But from 17, from the weakest vintage. So I may end up actually tasting these 2, 1, 3 out of vintage order, just because ending on the kind of the most rich and ripe vintage rather than what I think might be the best. But it's up to you. You guys can taste all 3 and then rearrange all your order, and you can tell me what you would have done.
So what information do you have when you're tasting blind within decanter?
So if we were doing a panel tasting, or if I was blind, tasting them blind, I would know the appellation down to the region, down to the classification. Sometimes we're going to do a Medoc Grand Cru Class A tasting in January at the office, and I'm going to say I don't want to know the classification, because I think once you know you've got a second growth in the list, maybe it might change your mind. So we'll remove that and we'll just know Pauillac, Margaux, whatever. So, but we would generally know the appellation of the wines. We'd know the vintage, obviously. We'd know the alcohol. We'd know the blend of the wines. So again, I can tell you that the 18 is 60% Merlot and 40% Cabernet Sauvignon for number 3.
Yeah.
Wine number 3. It's been aged in tanks and in barrels, so we'd know that, and vinification in tank. So we'd know and we'd know the price bracket also. So this one is under £20. So that's the kind of basic information. Then the middle one, the first one, I'll tell you. It's a Lussac Saint-Emilion. It's 2016. It's 13.5. It's vinification in stainless steel, aging for 12 months in oak, 50% new, 80% Merlot, 20% Cabernet Franc, and it's UK price bracket £20 to £30. And the middle one, number 2, is Pessac Léognan, 2017. It's 13% alcohol. It's aging 12 months in oak barrels, 40 to 50% new. It's Cabernet Sauvignon, 70%, and 30% Merlot, and a price bracket £30 to £40. So we've got an amazing spread of different dominant grape varieties, different terroirs, different vintages, different prices. So I think, for me, all that information is really, really is great. And I would want to know, I get a bit geeky sometimes and ask for pH levels because I want to know acidity, and IPT levels because I want to know tannins. And it's maybe not every consumer actually cares. Maybe they don't even care about the terroir. Like, maybe they don't know that Saint-Emilion Plateau is limestone and that's why it's so brilliant, or Pomerol has blue clay and that's why it's so brilliant. But for me, I love having that information. The same with pH, to know, well, what is the acidity? If it's 3.9, how long is it going to age for? That at some point might pose a problem. If it's 3.2, wow, that's going to be really sharp and tangy. So for me, I like to know that. Same with IPTs. This year, apparently, they have IPTs off the charts for 2023. Never seen before IPT levels. So going into Primeurs next year, I'm already going to think, wow, these are going to be tannic wines, and I'm going to need a break every 10 wines. So for me, the more information, the better. Blind or not blind, but that's what we would get. Okay, so the question was talking about tasting barrel samples on Primeur. And we're actually talking about this morning. So Primeurs is a very, very specific beast. I'm not sure how many of you have tasted Bordeaux Primeurs in the room.
Maybe explain what it is.
Yeah, essentially you're tasting the wines when they're very young. So most of the blends will have been completed by January, but not all of them. Some people like to keep their lots separate and blend, the next year. So you're tasting baby wines that have been more recently bottled in little half bottles. They used to be big bottles, now they're smaller bottles. And you're assessing them at that kind of formative stage where it's a historic process based on people buying wine as futures before they were bottled, and it's still continuing to this day. And I guess it's still to do with cash flow for the business, and particularly ordering different size bottles. So at that point you can specify you want magnums, double magnums, Jeroboams. And I think today that's actually still kind of a reason to buy Primeurs if you like large formats. But anyway, so we don't know, by and large, 99.5% where the wine is coming from. Whether we will be told whether it's the blend has been finished and what the particular blend is, what the alcohol at the time is. But quite often they're drawing samples from different barrels. They could be the same barrels, could be different barrels. They could have been open a day, they could have been open 2 days. They might have been sent across town. You might be tasting in situ. There are a couple of estates, Château Angelus, for instance, Château Rasin-Segler, that let you go and pick your own barrel to taste from. And they're quite open about that. They're very happy, and they say, you've got the whole room. And there's different coopers also, which minutely might change the taste of the wine, different toasting of the barrels. But you can go and say, okay, well, I want to try that one, and I want to try that one, I want to try that one. And it's great, you know? And others will let you taste the individual components. So the Merlot, the Cabernet Franc, the Cabernet Sauvignon, and then the blend afterwards. But by and large, you don't know. And there are, I don't know, old wine stories that maybe different critics get different samples. Some more for the American palate, some more for the UK palate. I don't know. It is rare to taste alongside other critics, certainly for those kind of top wines. So I don't know. But there are more and more estates who want you to visit the estate for primeurs, that they won't send their samples, and they like to control the conditions down to the glass. You know, and some glasses are better than others, fair enough, but some decant their wines, some don't. And some are happy to send the samples and let you sit with the bottle for a few days. So again, it's really different experiences at different places, and I try where possible to say the date I tasted, the location I tasted, just so it's very transparent. And sometimes you taste the same wine 4 or 5 times if they're part of a consultant tasting, an appellation tasting, a merchant tasting. So some wines you can taste 4 or 5 times, but others, certainly the first gross, if I want to taste Lafite or Margaux, I have to drive up the D2 and go and make an appointment. So sometimes it's logistically impossible to taste more than once. So if let's start the tasting.
Which wine are we starting with?
What do you all think? Should we start with in vintage order? Start number 3, the 18?
Yeah, that's good.
All right, let's start. This is the most generic. So if I was looking at this wine, as I am completely blind, I'm thinking, okay, it's going to be quite juicy, fruity, charming. It's under 20 pounds. I'm not expecting massive complexity, massive length. Okay, so I'm getting quite ripe fruit. Maybe a touch of alcohol. I'm a bit sensitive to alcohol, even at 14%, but kind of really ripe cherries, dark chocolate, kind of a mocha. It smells like it's from a warm vintage, so even if I didn't know it's 18, I might say 18 or 20 perhaps. This smells quite young, although it's freshness. It's quite a rich colour in the glass. It looks quite nice. For me, there's a little bit of cedar, a little bit of tobacco, a little bit of spice, some there. It's juicy. I get nice acidity. I think there's freshness on the palate. It's red fruits. It's quite nice. It's a little bit kind of tight around in my mouth, a little bit spiced edges. So I don't think it's got layers, but I think it's quite charming. I think it would go with food quite nicely.
When would you drink this wine if you were to drink it?
I think it's a kind of an everyday wine that you'd pick up. It's probably not a special occasion wine. It doesn't have a huge amount of length for me. I still get a little bit of a flavour still, but it's not lean, not austere. I think it's quite a nice expression. There's some succulence there. It's well presented. A bit of licorice on the finish, suggesting the oak again. So maybe, you could leave this still a couple of years, maybe, if you didn't want to drink it. I think that's a great thing about Bordeaux, is that you can buy a £20 or euro wine and it will age 5-10 years easily, depending on the kind of characteristics that you want. For me, it's not exceptional, but it's fine. It's absolutely fine.
So if I was to ask you to score it here and now, would you?
For me, it doesn't hit the 90-point category. I'd have to fall down somewhere between 87 and 89. Maybe 87, 88, 88. I think I'd have to, or I'd want to maybe see it as part of a bigger range to say, okay, what other kind of Bordeaux reds have I tried that are from 18? Is it slightly better than that? Is it worse than that? What else is it like? How does it compare to these two? Where would I benchmark in terms of score? So for the moment, I would be around that, 87, 89, maybe an 88 point. So the next one, let's go. No, I would want to pinpoint it against the other AOC Bordeauxs. I mean, it's very rare that I personally would get 3 wines from different vintages and different terroir also. So I would go back to my notes, if I have any from Bordeaux 2018, look at what I said about them and try and imagine, okay, well, do I like this more? And is it good value? Can I recommend this? At what point at what score would I really give? 88 for me is obviously a better wine than 87. But 88, it's a nice wine that I would say, yeah, go to the store and pick it up and drink it and enjoy. Okay, so number 2, this is the 2017. So this has a majority of Cabernet Sauvignon, so I'm expecting it to be a bit more structured. However, 17 is a lighter vintage. It's not your 18, it's not your 16, it's not your 20, it's not your 19, it's not your 22. They are going to be more elegant, a bit more finessed, maybe towards a UK palate, if we can really say that still. It's going to be a bit finer, maybe for sooner drinking, potentially. And from Pessac, you're not sure necessarily, is it going to be more gravel terroir, is it going to be more limestone, is it going to be more clay, because it's a mix in Pessac. So I'd want to obviously taste it to see where it kind of falls down. It's quite nice. It's got some fragrance on the nose, a bit of menthol characters, a little bit of the Cabernet kind of greeny herbal aspects that you get with that grape, which I love. It's quite delicate. It's quite nuanced. It's not really shouting out the glass to me. It's quite high in acid. It's quite tangy. Kind of makes me suck my cheeks in. But what I love with the 17s and the 21s also is that the sun isn't masking any terroir aspects. And for me, that's also what I love most about Bordeaux, is that you really can pin a wine to a place. And you can. I mean, you can tell a Pauillac from a Santa Sef, and you can tell a Saint-Emilion from a Pomerol. And I like that this, well, for me, it's putting me on gravel because it's quite salty. There's a minerality there. It's a little bit lean, but it's not unpleasant. It's still balanced. It's lighter. It's not giving you flesh and plumpness. But I feel like I would say it's from this vintage. And from the terroir, maybe we'll find out afterwards. But I quite like the expression. I think it's quite pretty. It's quite finessed. And so those kind of weaker or off vintages, for me, really express what the estate is trying to do. And I think you can tell a good winemaker better in a weaker vintage than you can in a stronger vintage, that everything isn't masked by sun and oak and tannins and ripeness. It's hard to make a good 2017. And I think this is good. I think this is really nice. Value. So it's about value and whether there's a sliding scale when I think of scores. To be honest, it has an importance, price, but more so I would say I would use the tasting note to evaluate the value and versus quality. I think you can't, we also talked about this morning when Claire asked, would an under £20 get a 95 points? And I don't know, it's generally cheaper wines or more value wines are made differently to those that are more expensive. They are given, there may be different harvested, there may be different sorting, different barrels, different aging, different corks potentially. But if I taste a wine that I think is great, that I know is under £20 or is valued, then I will say this is great. I really recommend it. This is a bargain. I wouldn't necessarily give it a better score just because it's cheaper, but I would talk about the great winemaker or that it's overperformed for its price bracket. Equally, very, very expensive. The flip side is very, very expensive wines can get low scores too. You can give a first growth 93 points. So price definitely doesn't necessarily equate to quality. Mostly it does. But when there are wines that are really great, I did a huge value Bordeaux tasting for the UK last year. It's 150 wines, all under £20. And there were some amazing wines, but 93 was still the highest score. But that was brilliant. That's a really great score. So yes, it does play a part. And certainly for the awards, they have different stickers for value where they have exceeded expectations. But would it change my score? No. So for this one in the middle, the score, I would be around, I think it, and again, so where you place, you'd hope that let's say a 92-point wine in 2017, it's not going to be the same taste as a 92-point wine in 2018, but where it sits within their peers and for that vintage, it still gets the same score. And I was saying to Claire, okay, well, this wine maybe I might give a 91 or 92 points. I like it. I think it's great. I think it's a great example. Maybe I might fall on 92 points, but it's not going to taste the same as 92 points 2018. And that's why, for me, it's really important to know your vintages and know what style that you want from your wine. I feel the quality is going to be the same, but the style will be completely different. So that's how I might justify giving scores at the same level for completely different vintages. But again, there's another aspect, which is the estate profile. You know, if they've over and achieved, you know, if they're really excelling, then, and this is why verticals are quite interesting, because you may end up thinking a wine has a different score in a vertical where you start from the beginning and their most recent vintages are excellent. Well, you have to start at a certain point. You take the best and then work down from that. And so again, you then have to think in your mind, well, oh my gosh, that was better than that, and that was better than that, but that doesn't really fit with what I thought in Primas, because you're comparing them to a different set of wines. And so again, it's not an exact science, and you try and do your best and try and calibrate the wine within the set it's in and hope it overall comes out somewhere where you want it to be.
I think we have a few minutes left for the
last wine. Okay. So this is a 2016 Le Sec. So 2016, one of the best vintages of the last 20 years, maybe ever. It was seen as an exceptional vintage at the time. The wines are generally, from birth, have been very charming, very pretty, very easy to drink, unlike, let's say, 2015 or 2018 maybe. This one, as it's from Le Sec, I'm expecting a little bit more flinty, a bit more minerality, maybe a bit more lean and austere, but still some structure. It's 80% Merlot, 20% Cabernet Franc, which is a grape I love, and it's been grown a bit more on the right bank because it's a bit easier to deal with and not as difficult as Merlot. It's very perfumed. I'm getting way more Cabernet Franc on the nose, which I really, really like. It's quite intense aromatics, but ripe, but quite cool. And there was that sunshine in 2016, so I guess it depends when producers picked and how they vinified. It's a bit of salty, a bit of tobacco. It's juicy, quite lively in my mouth. It's quite mouth-watering. Makes my mouth water. It's quite succulent. I think it's quite charming, quite friendly. It's quite youthful still. It's also quite direct. It has that kind of linearity, which you can get in 16, where you do get depth, but not so much weight on the palate. I feel like it's giving quite a lot of fruit. A nice, almost chalky texture, kind of, slightly. Maybe from a limestone or something to do with the terroir in Le Sec. It's not the longest wine. It's not the most filling. It's not the most complex, but I find it really, really enjoyable. I like the kind of salty tang to it. I get more the Cabernet Franc aspect and maybe some kind of old vine aspect to it. I think it's very, very easy drinking, and it's stylish. It's quite stylish. I like the style in general. I think it's a nice example from Le Sec, which is a satellite appellation. They don't make that many wines. It's obviously not as loved and famous as Saint-Emilion itself, but I think they are making some great wines there too. So, and it's always going to be a value, ish category. This is a value of £20 to £30, and number 2 was £30 to £40 if I didn't say. So I would say this is a nice example. I mean, when you get over £20, you really want a wine to deliver, and I think this is nice. I think it's worthy of its category, score-wise. 91. I mean, I think it's nice. I think it's great. For me, it's probably not. It doesn't have the finesse, the complexity of the number 2, even though it's from a weaker vintage. But I think it's got cool fruits. It's got freshness. It's got balance. So there's a question back there. Someone stop me talking. Oh, sorry, I can't hear.
Do you have a standard time from when you pull a cork and then taste? Question 1. Question 2, do you ever do a calibration where someone gives you a wine that you've already had to see if it's tasted the same and scored the same? And the third one, do you ever taste on the biodynamic calendar?
Good questions. In terms of time opening, no, unfortunately. I guess if I was at home, I'd wait a couple of hours. But when you go to estates and for tastings, you're not always sure you can ask how long they've had the wines open, but invariably some like to open them right in front of you and you have zero time, but at least you're tasting all the wines in exactly the same way. And some will go, oh, we opened them, this morning, or oh, this is left, we opened this yesterday and we want you to taste it. So I don't have the same situation for every wine, but it is taken into account once you know how long it's been opened. The second one was the calibration. Sometimes, yes, and it's always nice finding a wine. I keep a record of all the wines I've tasted, so it's nice to go back and think, oh, okay, well, I tasted that last week or 2 weeks ago, and how's it tasting now? So, yes, sometimes there will be that, or you taste wine in a vertical and then you taste the same wine at lunch and then you see how it's kind of evolved. And I really like doing that also, because when you're I tasted a huge 1982 tasting earlier this year in Canada, and the wines were open, and it is amazing how much they changed at the end of the evening. Some had completely fallen off a cliff, whereas you're tasting them straight away and you're like, yes, it's actually really juicy, really lively. So again, you have to take into consideration the age of the wines as well, and try and give your best analysis of what is going on. I heard yesterday that some critics try the wines over 4 or 5 days and 5 times, and I was like, wow, that logistically, I don't know how that is possible when tasting so many wines. In an ideal world, maybe yes, you could go to the office day on day on day and taste the same 40 wines 5 times, but that really isn't possible. And so you just try to give, based on all your knowledge and everything, you try to give the best assessment. And biodynamic calendar is strange, and I don't live by it, but sometimes if wines are collectively tasting bad, I go, is this a root day? Because the wines are really terrible today. But I also think weather plays a massive part. There are tastings for primeurs, and you can have a storm one day, you can have sunshine, you can have rain. And I did exactly the same tasting, and one day in Saint-Emilion, it was the Grand Cru Classé again, and it was a storm, and the wines were awful. They were so bad. I hated them. And I just thought, maybe it's me. Maybe I've eaten something. It's terrible. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to go back the next day. Even though I hadn't planned it and I wasn't prepared for it, and it was a 2 hours drive out my way, and the wines had really changed. They were much better the next day. Again, I didn't assess whether that was a biodynamic thing, but I thought, well, okay, the pressure outside is just crazy and the wines don't deserve it. And again, for me, that's really important. You've got to think a winemaker has spent their entire year making this bottle of wine, and the love and everything that goes into it. You've got to really try and give that wine the fairest assessment, and not to give inflated scores or notes where they, don't deserve it. And it's not my job to make a winemaker make a wine that just I like. So I really try to be objective also in saying, okay, well, I might not like this wine, but that doesn't mean it's not a good wine, and that doesn't mean someone won't like it and it's not worthy of an okay score or a good score even. There are certainly Bordeaux styles that I would not buy and I would not choose to drink, but I know a lot of people that would. And I've been in the same rooms where they've been their favourite wines. And so I can't discount those, and I think Decanter tries to be very impartial in that sense. It might mean that people don't follow me necessarily as for my specific taste, but I think that's okay. I'm fine with that.
I think we've run out of time.
Sorry, rambling on. The aging potential, sure. So for number 3, I would give it a relatively short. I mean, already it's 18, so it's 5 years old, and I think that's great for a wine to be up to 5 years old for a generic Bordeaux that costs, 15 euros. I think it still has a bit more life in it left, so I would say that has another 2 years potentially. The middle one I'd say is much longer. Even for a weaker vintage, I would say that's up to 20 years. Pessac, they're generally well-built wines. And the number 1, maybe 10 to 15 years. Wines do live longer than you think. I know that we don't all have cellars and can age our wines, and people like to drink them young, but I love mature Bordeaux, and if you can age it that bit longer, I think you're always rewarded for it.
I think we have to stop there.
Okay. Thank you
so much for listening.
going.
Thank you. Thanks, Georgie.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, cin cin.